Expect the best used car deals guaranteed. Visit arnoldclark.com.
Welcome to Peter and Roughie's Football Show, sponsored by Arnold Clark. I'm Peter Martin, Alan Ruff, Steven Naismith and Hugh McDonald here with me on Thursday's show. Delighted to have your company. Don't forget to follow us and share our stream on Facebook. And if you get a chance, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel as well. We'd love to have you as part of the football family. There's lots to talk about from the action from last night and, of course, look ahead to the weekend's football, as well as many of the main stories emerging in Scotland and beyond today that we are going to talk about. The first one is a very sensitive subject. It's one that's been on the burners for quite a while, that people have been waiting for a review into historic abuse in Scottish football. There was an investigation, an inquiry led by the former children's charity executive Martin Henry, and the findings of that inquiry have been revealed today. And with that very, very extensive document comes a statement from the SFA. And Ian Maxwell, the SFA Chief Executive. As Chief Executive of the Scottish FA, I'm deeply upset by the contents of the final report into sexual abuse in Scottish football, and in particular by the deeply personal traumatic experiences endured by young players who were abused by people in whom they and their families placed trust. I reiterate my sincerest apology on behalf of Scottish football to all who have experienced abuse in our national game. The report also recognises the progress the Scottish FA have made to achieve the highest standards of well-being and protection for children and young people. Since the board issued a directive in 2016, we can report 80% of the original recommendations are either completed or in progress. And with that in mind, the work is ongoing, overseen by the Independent Wellbeing and Protection Advisory Board. Football provides a tremendous outlet for young people in Scotland, and it is the responsibility of everyone involved in Scottish football to protect and cultivate that for future generations. Now, that's the first part, which is the statement from the SFA. We will hear from Ian Maxwell, the SFA Chief Executive, in just a moment, courtesy of the video he released on the SFA's YouTube channel. But first and foremost, I feel it's only right and proper that because we have people and fans who engage with their comments on our programme on YouTube and on Facebook, this is a sensitive subject. It is a subject which requires a tremendous insight from the professional people who conducted the review. So over a 20-year period of broadcasting, I've listened to a number of people all claiming to have an insight into who's to blame, but and who should be prosecuted. But this is a report which, in the end, Hugh McDonald, basically reveals the pain that was suffered by children that were not protected. Some of them have to live with that pain. Some were unable to live with that pain.
That is the core of the tragedy, Peter. We're not talking about some policy or some issue that's to do with governance in any way. We're talking about people's lives, and we're talking about people who lost their lives as well. I think anybody who's been involved in football in any way over the last 30 or 40 years will know of people who have been severely and sometimes fatally damaged by what went on. And so the first aspect of the report is to accept that and look at that as a proper and dignified way of going about what happened and setting out what happened. But the more important thing going forward, or the most important thing of going forward, of course, Peter, is to try to make sure that this never happens again, and that is the real thrust of the report. 93 recommendations, all involving great stringencies around clubs, around people who should be able to go into clubs to coach and to deal with youngsters. So that is for me that's the most crucial aspect now of going forward.
After this, I think there is a general view from Martin Henry, certainly, that there needs to be, a public apology from a number of clubs. Now, that public apology, I think, from Martin Henry's point of view, and I'll elaborate on why I think he's saying this, is it's not an admission of liability, because he feels as if that's been a barrier to progress, Roughie, in this whole process of getting to the bottom of the problem. Some clubs are thinking, well, if we make an apology, we're accepting liability for this and we're open to financial pain.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the button. That's basically what it is. That is the thing that the clubs are worried about. Obviously quite a lot of these things are historic. And obviously, unfortunately, some of the people who committed these crimes are no longer about. And that's another one that's hard to deal with as well, because there is no punishment going to be dished out to them. But I think you're right. Financially, I think the lawyers at every club will be advised in which way to go down here, because it is, something that they are very, very worried about. Because basically, Peter, as I said, it's historic. The people in charge of the clubs now possibly had nothing to do with the incidents that happened. It's because they were so long ago. So they're the ones that are left to deal with it. So they have to make sure that they deal with it properly. And hopefully that's what we all do.
Yeah, and with that in mind, can I just actually highlight the fact that while this report comes out and talks about historic sexual abuse, that does not mean that it's at an end. It is something that society still has a problem with, and there is still a need to protect children in sports, in anything that involves adults with children. There needs to be a care and a structure in place. Before we go on to hear from Ian Maxwell, of course, the report itself calls on clubs like Celtic, Rangers, Hibs and many others to make an unequivocal and unreserved public apology to the victims. Many of the clubs have been blasted for failing to protect youth players from predators. The apology on behalf of the SFA was made, first of all, by the SFA Chief Executive, Ian Maxwell.
I would like to start by reiterating my apologies, Chief Executive of the Scottish FA, to anyone who suffered abuse within our game. Martin Henry and the review team deserve enormous credit for their part in producing such a comprehensive piece of work. It is a milestone for Scottish football in terms of our work in the child wellbeing and protection area. But I think the most important outcome from today is that the survivors' voices are being heard and their narrative has been published.
So that was the first statement from Ian Maxwell. The next one obviously is, okay, here's the report. What are you doing to make sure this sort of thing is eradicated, certainly minimalised, and if there's anything that surfaces, action is taken?
Football is absolutely a safer place due to the report. There are a number of recommendations at this point in time. There are 80% of the recommendations either complete or in progress. But I think it's important that the recommendations aren't seen as a checklist. The report outlines that continual improvement across the areas of child wellbeing and protection are required. We can't look at the recommendations as once we tick all those off, that means Scottish football is as safe as it possibly can be.
Now, Stephen, the one thing, this is a lengthy report, and as I was looking at it, it just sent a shiver down my spine. It did draw great comparisons with a book that I read from Matthew Syed, who's a very distinguished journalist who looked into black box thinking, which is basically triggered off by a gentleman who wasn't prepared to accept medical professions' deliberation over losing his wife. He wasn't accepting their reasons for the loss of his wife, and he challenged it. And by challenging it, he found that the medical profession in America had this policy of trying to avoid liability, to just say, this is our viewpoint on it, accept it. And then he went round so many other industries, and he found that people found it very difficult to accept failure, learn from it, and take the mistakes they made, and then put into place a strategy to try and not make the same mistakes again. And the one industry that he found that was an example to all was the aviation industry. where basically people in the aviation industry shared the problems. If there were mistakes made, they shared them because they wanted to make their industry the best and the most safe it could be. And he then goes on to talk about that in, whether it's sport, whether it's industry, it's about understanding and accepting failure so that you can then move on to success. And I think I saw great parallels with that, with the pain of this document.
Yeah, I've read that book myself. And it is, the one thing I would say is, in terms of that book, it is very crystal clear, black and white. This is how. But in my whole time in Scottish football, whatever agenda is there to be seen, we are so far from that collective. And I think this is much bigger than everything. It needs to be one of these situations that everybody takes note and works collectively to make Scottish football. It's such a big thing in Scottish people's lives in general that, one, it's a safe place, and two, that none of these things can ever happen again. I think reading some of the stories that have been in the past, that I can't fathom some of that, to think, how could this have happened? It's incredible. So the very small crumb of comfort these people that have stand up and said their piece and brought this to light is that they are the ones now that are getting everybody talking and things to move to a much safer place for kids, especially in football.
And the one element of this that was throughout, 30 or 40 years of an investigation that could probably have gone back a century, Hugh McDonald, was, the mistakes that couldn't help the children, where basically you've got a situation, and I looked at the victims, the fears of them, the shame, lack of support, doubt, guilt, self-blame, don't want to be shamed in front of their families. We're talking about, don't want to tell people about it. They think they're in the wrong. They're not. There just wasn't a structure in place to help them. Some of them actually felt as if they were telling lies. They were made to feel as if they were looking to try and gain some kind of compensation illegally.
This is the most, there's so many horrific things about the victims, but one of the most pernicious things about victims, and I've spoken to victims of crimes like these, is that feeling that they're to blame. The first feeling from a lot of the victims who would be in certain situations would say, well, why me and not Jimmy Bloggs that was sitting next to me? Is it because I was weaker? Is it because I was more compliant? Is it because, and going down that terrible rat hole where not only have these people are absolute victims, just 100% victims, they're actually, they get into a lifestyle of blaming themselves, and this self-blame that occurs after these self-blame and shame becomes a cocktail that blights lives for forever in some cases, and ends life in some cases as well. I've actually I know myself of people who were abused in such circumstances, who committed suicide. No, I don't have the intelligence or the education or the proof, or the authority to decide that it was a direct cause of that abuse. But I would say to everybody, and I think most people would agree with me, that it would be a huge contributing cause to that, a huge contributing cause to that. So that's the kind of, we use words like evil and diabolical as very easily, Peter, they trip off the tongue sometimes. But this is where child abuse is really evil. It is blighting the lives of the innocent. It is ending the lives of the innocent. It's causing, ripples amongst families that will never end. That never end. The pain just goes on. It's an awful situation.
Yes, absolutely. And the one element of it, which is why I emphasise that this is not over, is because quite simply these predators, these individuals, whether they sneak into the system, whether they were allowed back into the system previously, which was wrong, they use a situation of their power, threat, harsh treatment of individual kids who are at their weakest when they're growing up, and whether it's threats or intimidation or indeed coercion and chastisement. And there was a number of things in the whole document that I thought to myself, I can understand how kids suddenly were left vulnerable and unable to make that cry for help. So with that in mind, we'll wait to see the clubs coming out to make that apology and embracing the acceptance of guilt, that mistakes were made, and if indeed, as Steven Naismith highlighted there, a need to move forward collectively, to share the information, to get involved in the network with the police and the other organisations to make sure that everybody is aware if there is suspicion, that you nip it in the bud so that there is no chance that a child can be open to this in the future. Partick Thistle today have come out with an apology. Just one of the clubs, obviously with an individual that had been operating in a situation which was unsavoury. Partick Thistle notes the content of the report published today in relation to the independent review of historical sexual abuse in Scottish football. We remain committed to cooperating fully with the investigations, and we apologise sincerely on behalf of Partick Thistle to anyone personally affected by historic abuse within our game. We fully acknowledge the impact of these events and their enduring effect on those affected. Thistle regards the safety of the children and young people associated with the club as being of paramount importance. Safeguarding is an everyday part of all Thistle does, and we will continue to uphold the strictest standards of compliance with all safeguarding legislation now and in future. And I hope many other clubs embrace that statement that came out today, Roughie.
Yeah, it's been ongoing. As I say, it's a wee bit historic because nobody at Partick Thistle was there when this allegedly happened. And it is an ongoing case that obviously I can't talk about it, but it's something that worried the club most sincerely, because we have an academy from kids from 8 years old all the way up. So, I mean, there's a lot of responsibility looking after these kids in the academy, and it's something that we take very strongly. That's why the people who are in place in our academy have went through every procedure, as most clubs will have now in the modern day, that anybody teaching kids will have to went through a rigorous test to make sure that they are the right people to coach the kids. And that's been the failing in the past, that unfortunately these people weren't regularly tested, and that's why they get into the game so long ago. So I think we're doing our best, to try and cut it out. But you're right, you can't move away from it, and you have to answer for what's there in front of you.
Okay, it's a very delicate subject, not one that you like to start and dwell on, but I think it's necessary that we comment on it. And thank you to Stephen, Hugh and Roughie for their points of view on it. All I would say now, we will move on now, but I would like to offer my apologies to some of the people who've had to suffer the comments that you see on, whether it be our YouTube channel there or our Facebook. We will, and we do on a regular basis, try and bar as many people and ban as many people as possible. On a regular basis, try and ban as many people as possible from our pages who are basically people who just comment without any education or information whatsoever, and some of the stuff that they post is despicable. We try and ban as many as possible. So I offer my apologies to normal thinking people who are informed and are quite capable of looking at a review, looking at the news, reading the news, and understanding that there are a lot of intelligent people who have put together this inquiry and given their assessment of what went wrong and what needs to be done in the future to protect children. The reason I offer that is that I can't ban all of them. And although we do it as a crusade on this programme to try and just embrace as many football fans as possible, I notice there are a number on there who are trying point scoring, blaming clubs and individuals and making unfounded allegations which we couldn't police. It would take us from now until doomsday. All I would say is, remember, it's a football show and we'll deal with the facts, and I'll try and ban as many of the idiots as I possibly can. If I don't get them, we'll get them another time. And on the evidence of yesterday's news, sooner or later, social media and the policing of it will come and they'll get found out. We move on to the football, and quite simply, with the football in mind, last night Celtic got a 4-0 win, Roughie, and I think it was a fairly convincing one, totally different from the game at Celtic Park against St Mirren.
Yeah, you could certainly see by Neil Lennon's reaction at the end of the game. It's something that has been wanting to happen for the last 3 or 4 weeks or even longer. You know, certain players stepped up to the plate, quality players, and the scoreline eventually. I would say the second half more than the first half, but there was certainly enough evidence there to say that some of the players had got some confidence back, which was seriously lacking. But the players that stepped, I mean, Rogic, for an instance, is a fantastic player, and how he can't turn in that kind of performance more often, I do not know. The boy's sheer quality. And I think overall, you know, just the delight of having a convincing win, which hasn't been happening for the past 2 or 3 months. And but I would say in the boy Turnbull, I think Celtic have won another watch. You know, this boy is going to be worth a few bob in 2 or 3 years. He was absolutely outstanding last night.
Neil Lennon, well happy with the 90 minutes.
I thought he played really well at the weekend, and he's carried that on tonight. Delighted for him to get the goal. It was a great finish. And then just his all-round play in general was magnificent. And they're looking far more like themselves tonight. You know, Brown, Rogic, Christie when he came on, Edward. Yeah, they played very, very well. And looks really good at the back as well.
Well, no point mincing my words on this one. Roughie's complimented Rogic. Neil Lennon was waxing lyrical about him. Hugh, a really talented player. Can't play 90 minutes more often than not. Appearances and goals returned over the last 3 seasons, not great.
No, I mean, the thing about Rogic and his dogdom since his early days at Celtic, and you remember this is a career at Celtic, what, Peter, 7-8 years in the first team, so there's a lot of evidence here, and the evidence is that if you just look through it on a regular basis, he's fragile injury-wise. He always suffers from an injury, and he's a 60-minute, 70-minute player. Now, out of that, if you did a Rogic highlight reel, I reckon he would be one of the great highlight reels in Scottish football. He's that good, and I'm talking about highlight reels as in goals. You know, the goals he scores, you know, remember one under Ronnie Dyla at Kilmarnock, he scored the goal in the, of course, the invincible season, winning the treble, the cup final against Aberdeen, and he does that on a regular basis. So nobody can doubt his ability, but it's his endurance and his resilience. And now at this stage of the career, that will be, I think that's now irredeemable. I don't think, even if I think he will go and probably go in the summer, but wherever he goes, that would seem to be, it's just going to be part of his career.
Was there a penalty, Steven Naismith, for Greg Taylor? Some people suggesting it was soft.
I think it's similar to the Ayeti one. When somebody's running at that pace into the box, it doesn't take much for you to get off balance. So I would say it was a penalty. I think the TV clips show it, or the footage they get, you don't necessarily see the full thing. But for me, it was a penalty. People might say it's soft, but it is what it is. He's put himself in a position where the defender's having to react, and the defender knows he's in trouble, which then he reacts, and for me, it's a penalty. But just in general in the game, I thought St Mirren started the game very well. They were unfortunate with the McGrath injury that probably upset their rhythm. And then Celtic win convincingly with very high quality goals. But as said so many times this season, it's okay doing it now when you're 20 odd points behind. That's the fight, and the quality was needed 4 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. You picked up on that point there about the diving. I mean, Albin Ayeti is at the centre of it. He did get a 2-match ban, and in the end, Albin Ayeti is well aware of people suggesting he was a diver. He's having none of it.
This is part of football. This is part of our profession. We have to accept it. They can call us whatever they want because we know what's going on the pitch. If they want to call me like that, they should call me like that. But it isn't true.
Yeah, I think he's standing by his point of view, Roughie, that it wasn't a dive in his view. Steven has said on countless occasions on this programme that strikers, if somebody wants to make a stupid challenge, then it's up to the referee to make that call on it. I thought it was a dive. They didn't think it was a dive. He didn't get a two-match ban, and that's the rule. So in the end, it's not that he gets off with it. It's just that it wasn't proved.
Yeah, I don't think dive's the right word. I mean, a dive, I think I remember, I think it was Chris Boyd diving against Queen of the South or something like that in a game. That was a dive. I think this one for me, it just went down rather easy. And the small contact that there was, you have to make up your mind, that that's what made him go down. But as Stevie says, the modern day footballs, unless you've actually experienced in that position, and running at pace and, and somebody touches you, it's up to you, whether you think you've got to go down easy or not. I mean, I've said on numerous occasions, and I'm not saying it's all players. I remember, it's that long ago when I played, I would remember if I was diving, if the ball was coming through and I was diving at maybe Derek Johnson's feet or Joe Harper's feet or anything, I would guarantee they'd jump over the top of me. And that would happen on numerous occasions. It's a modern day thing now, and if players feel as if they're doing something for their club and they're getting a penalty, then so be it. We just have to live with it.
Now, two quick things here, and I've got to pick you up on this. And please forgive me because we've been together that long and I love you. But first of all, where the hell did you pull the Chris Boyd diving against you in the South out of left? I mean, honestly, the big man's getting enough pelters now, and suddenly you've just gained them from nowhere.
No, it was just the first thing. That came to my mind. I remember it against Queen of the South. He tried to get a penalty, and I think he actually got done for it. That was the first instance that just came in. I just remember it. I don't know why.
Okay. Right, okay. So, and the second
Tell me you remember it, Hugh.
Yeah, I remember. I think the worst one I remember was Robert the Bruce. I thought he went down very easily.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That one as well.
I have to tell you though, Hugh, the second part of this, and this is again, I love the fact that I'm going to let Stephen comment on this. I love the fact that Roughie is rewriting history. This is a modern thing. No, it's not. There are millions of strikers down through the 60s and 70s who cheated and died.
It's just now there's more games on television, so all the youngsters see the TV games and think,
thank you.
I'll have a bit of that. I was surprised that Roughie went with Chris Boyd and not somebody at a World Cup when you've been at a World Cup and some big name that you could have.
I know. I never thought I'd hear this in the programme. Poor Boydie, he's just getting a kicking everywhere now, and Roughie's just absolutely battered them there again. But nevertheless,
Boydie never usually went fast enough to dive.
Just about that's the other thing. How can you actually start to pick up pace when all you do is sit in the penalty box? I mean, come on. I mean, you did all his running for him, to be perfectly honest with you, Stephen. Anyway, apart from anything else, listen, the good thing about it is Jim Goodwin, first to come out and praise his players for the effort they put in, the way they went about their business against Celtic at Celtic Park. No excuses last night.
The second half, I'm really disappointed with that. I thought we were poor, but credit to Celtic. I thought they were very good. They seemed to up the tempo a little bit in the second half. Their movement was a lot better, and they caused us a number of problems.
Yeah, so I still think, and it was a good point that Stephen made there, Hugh, about McGrath going off. McGrath's been a good player for St Mirren, especially in the last couple of months. I like him.
I like him a lot as well, and there's certain players that are really central to the way the team is set up, and he was taking a really crucial cog in the team, and Stephen's right. In the first 10 or 15 minutes, someone were on top. I mean, that's what you forget about a 4-0 game. You forget to look around the hole, and the first 10 or 15 minutes, without threatening Bain in any way, some were on the front foot. You could see what they were trying to do. They would see what they're up to. Celtic were getting pressed very strongly. Some were pretty decent on the ball. Both these things disappeared as the game went on. Obviously, the pressing disappeared to a certain extent. I think Celtic's movement and, of course, the longer the game goes, the more tiring it is to press. That goes out the window. And I think the longer the game went on, St Mirren's ability to pass the ball deteriorated, quite significantly. I didn't think it was I understand why Neil Lennon has to come out and say outstanding, superb, etc., etc. He's got a team to try and move forward. But I thought it was just maybe on the right side of satisfactory, Peter. I thought there was several good performances. I thought Ayer was top class. I think he's particularly. I think people look at him the way he brings out the ball from defence. I don't think there's anybody in Scotland can do it that with the penetration that he can do. Brown was more like himself last night, I felt, and Turnbull just proves that he's got so much more in his locker as well. That's a kid who'll improve. So there was really good bright spots in it, but I wasn't sort of really over enthused by it.
Yeah, and thanks to Hugh Scott, who's a Rangers fan who regularly posts messages, and Hugh's right on the money here. He says, Peter, I remember one of our players getting slated for diving back in the 80s, John McDonald. Do you remember him?
That's
well, Hugh, I have to say, I play regularly with John McDonald for Dukla Pumperson in the old 11-a-sides now, and the amount of laughs we had about it. But John was a great player for Rangers, Roughie, but I'll tell you, if you touched him in the box, he was down.
Yeah, it would be a toss-up between him and Frank McGarvey. You could trip Frank McGarvey 20 yards for the 18 box, and he would go down in the box.
It's a scandal, isn't it? Suddenly, Robbie's memories returned.
I know. This is him now. I mean, it goes back to. I mean, you go back to. I mean, famously as well with Davy Wilson of Rangers, a fantastic player. You know, in the early '60s, middle '60s. You know, one of the great Rangers wingers with Willie Henderson on the other side. You know, he was always blamed for shall we say, going down easily. See, I think there's a really simple thing in football. And I think it's players, when they feel contact and going down, they know that if they feel contact and they don't go down, a referee will never give a penalty. A referee will never give a penalty for somebody being fouled in the box if they don't, in those situations, if they don't hit the deck. They just won't. If Greg Taylor yesterday ran into the box and he was tugged back, and people can say it's soft or really soft. If Greg Taylor had continued to run, there would be no penalty. Yeah.
Can I go back? Sorry, Hugh, on you go.
No, say it.
No, I was just going. Can I go back to the bit that I'm talking about? Joe Harper and Derek Johnson jumping over the top of me. What I'm saying is, on the modern day now, if you're a goalkeeper, if you take a chance to dive at a striker's feet as he's coming through on you, you're taking a big risk. Because 9 out of 10, they will leave their foot in there, and you're done. And that's the point I'm trying to make. It's just the pace that the striker's going at, there's going to be contact. Some of them leave their foot in, some of them don't.
Yeah, the point that's why it's a penalty. I mean, see if Stevens in the box against Dunfermline and he dribbles round somebody inside the box and somebody stands on his toe, he's not going to turn around to the ref and say, "Do you know what, ref? Somebody just stood on my toe. That's a foul." He's got to go down, so the referees then got a decision to make. That's the way it is.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, it's a competition, it's a game, and the element of it is, how can I win this game for my team? The referee's there to decide what the game's all about, the professionalism of it, whether it be a professional foul or I am going to get closer to this goalkeeper to try and win as a penalty, will gain us an advantage. We potentially could win this match. We absolutely get that. The one thing here, and it goes now on to the Kemar Roofe situation, is basically, and I'll draw comparisons with things that have happened over the last couple of days, Stephen, and get your thoughts on it. Rangers released a statement, obviously, on the fact that Kemar Roofe picked up a 2-match ban for the challenge in the St Johnstone game against Murray Davidson. We note the outcome of today's hearing. Rangers FC recently called for consistency in the Scottish FA's disciplinary process. There seems to be real confusion within the game regarding which incidents are cited and those that are not. This confusion solidifies our viewpoint regarding the current system. Okay, they've slightly clouded the waters there, muddied the waters, I beg your pardon, and clouded the issue, which is basically Kemar Roos was a red card all day long. I think everybody accepts that. Taking the other point, though, which I think Rangers have made there, which I think is a valid point, Steven Naismith, is I think that there does need to be a look at and a review of, first of all, the refereeing and his assistants in certain incidents, and then the process that we have to, again, goes back to the top of the programme, we have to learn how to get a structure in place from the mistakes we're making to make sure we get a success in the future. Because some people would look at Callum McGregor last night, who I thought was lucky not to get a yellow touching on a red for a studs and a challenge. To a lesser degree, Scott Brown, maybe a yellow, but there are instances like that where I think Rangers have got a really good point, which is we need to get something in place which gives us a consistency if the referee fails.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And there's so many elements to it. For me, anyway. For instance, a live game on television or Celtic Park in Ibrox have got more cameras. So say you're somewhere else and the camera footage isn't there, then it's likely that a player might get off with it. On top of that, over the course, or probably since goal line technology, VARs came in, it's now there is kind of periods throughout a season where rules change. This whole handball one, this defender's defending with their hands behind their back, and what was a handball at the start of the season now isn't a handball. When I started and came into the professional game, it was as if, right, this season we are adopting these rules, and these rules are for the season. Whereas now there's changes and there's situations where people are saying, well, that's now not a foul. The refs have been told not to do that as a foul. And then, like you touched on, that I feel as if referees sometimes feel they don't want to commit because they maybe can have a look at it. If they don't book players or if things don't happen, then after the match they can go back and retrospective action can be taken. So it's a complicated situation, and one that I totally agree needs consistency, and it needs to just be firmed up that each action in the same category is pulled up or it's not.
Hugh?
Yeah, I agree. I think the compliance issue is an absolute mess. It's a basis for inconsistency because it doesn't apply to every club in Scotland. To be crude about it, you'll get away with more if you're playing with, for example, Cove on a Tuesday night than if you're playing with Rangers on the same night. I think the core problem that has to be addressed in Scottish football is the standard of refereeing. I think the standard of refereeing is poor. I think if you looked at it last night, Don Robertson had a good view of the tackle by Scott Brown and a good view of the tackle by Callum McGregor, and indeed penalised both tackles, but didn't produce a card. I'd be interested in professional, somebody like Steven and others who played in other leagues. I don't think there's another top-class league. This is how blunt I'm going to be about this. I don't think there's another top-class league that a referee would look at either of those tackles and not produce at least a yellow. I'm not talking about have a think about it. That would be for them automatic. It wouldn't be a thought of, I wonder if that's about that was all right.
Well, wait a minute then. Are you suggesting leniency or not a proper grasp of the rules?
I think both. One, I think culturally we're more lenient to tackles. You'll see it in Celtic Rangers games, and you'll even talk to referees after Celtic Rangers games where they'll say to you, see, what about that tackle in the first 10 minutes? I remember an anti-Stokes one a few years ago. I remember Morelos not long ago. But the referee's got to be looking at that and saying, that's a definite yellow. But what they do is they have this cultural thing of, let's manage the game. There's no point giving too many yellow cards too early. Let the game, and it's wrong because they're there to apply the laws of the game. And
have you witnessed that, Stephen, in an Old Firm game?
I've been involved in it, and I've thought to myself, right, it's early on, and the Old Firm's the one that is easiest to come to mind because it's such a big game, and the chat is, oh, the referee lost his control in the game and that. So 100% I've played in games where you go early doors and you think, right, I can leave a wee bit on here or be slightly late and get away with it. As a forward, it was less of an issue because if I get booked, you can get through the game without any real trouble. But it's definitely something that I've had in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Another
Peter,
match.
as you said there, some of the referees could be on a hiding to nothing. Because how many times have we seen, just say for talking say a cup final, and there's been a ween of bad challenges, and there's no yellow cards going out, and then somebody goes, if you'd have gave somebody a yellow card there, you know that they stamped all that out, and then you get the other side of it where a referee is giving out yellow cards left, right, and centre, and people say you're ruining the game. You know, so I think each referee interpret the problem is all the referees don't interpret it the same.
They'll have their own style.
Some of them have an idea. I'm going to book somebody the first challenge, and others have no. I'm going to let this flow and see where it goes. So for me, they're on a hiding to nothing, whatever way they go.
But I don't think so in Scotland, Roughie. I think in Scotland they're generally poor and they're generally lenient. I honestly think see, you couldn't get a referee. I mean, we'll never know. But I think it's a valid point to say that any referee in the top 5 leagues in Europe, looking at McGregor, and it was a pure view, Robertson saw it, is not even like it. It's not even a doubt about a yellow. That's a yellow 100 times out of 100.
But Hugh, see in a situation where like that, where say there's a big call and it's a red, a ref, I think, is more likely not to take action because he knows then going further down the line. Whereas if he sends a player off and it's not a red card, that impacts that game massively, which then brings him to the forefront of the talking points of the game. Whereas if nothing happens, retrospective action kicks in and the player gets punished anyway. I think that's in the minds, I feel like.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I think that's in the minds, Peter. But I think it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Well, one other thing I would also say is see with the retrospective action, see if everybody got points to say this is why we have came to this conclusion. I think that would stop a lot of the abuse and the negativity around all this process, because it's going back to the original black box thinking of give people the information for them to understand it.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've called for that before, but are you suggesting that they do it immediately after the game? Because I don't think it matters a jot, Stephen. I think if a referee comes out and says, this is why I gave it, this is the decision, people are still going to say, oh, no, you're bang out of order, you made a back end of that.
Yeah, no, more just when the retrospective actions happened, we came to this conclusion because this, and this. People, not everybody, but some people, but that's fair enough. I can understand that now.
Yeah. Okay, Roughie, in the end, Killie, with a new manager, couldn't get the win or even a point that they craved. Motherwell edged it by a 1-0.
Yeah, I think if you're decent enough, you'll give them a 1 each draw and give me 5 points. Because that's what they deserved. They definitely should have got something.
Hugh, he's slipping further and further behind in the predictor. We've got a night out, boys, and Roughie's paying.
No, I think you would agree that Kilmarnock should have taken something out of that game. They showed a lot of effort and determination. The ball just never went for them on certain occasions, but it was a good goal Motherwell scored. There's no doubt about that. And the wee boy Campbell's definitely on fire just now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll tell you another man that's on fire, Stephen. Tony Watt has worked really hard to get back to a full fitness, and his hold-up play, he's bringing others in. His work rate for me is impressive every time I see him, and he laid a beautiful ball that Alan Campbell didn't even need to check his stride.
No, I think it's shown when he plays well, Motherwell play well, but two things, he's maturing as a player. He's always had the natural ability, like being at a big club like Celtic, scoring against Barcelona early on in your career. You walk about thinking this is easy and there's not going to be any hard times, but he's went through them, I think in the past as well, he spoke about having a good connection with Motherwell as a club, and it's clear for everybody to see. He's a big player for them, and one I'm sure the manager will keep in as a kind of #1 pick.
Yeah, well, fair play to Graham Alexander. He's well impressed with what he's inherited.
But the players are showing their professionalism, their fitness levels to keep competing, and we know we've got some good players that are not in the team at the minute that can come on and help us. No, there's no breathing space in the minute. We can't think like that. We can't, just drop it down a gear and think we're okay. We have to keep the pedal to the floor and go to win as many games as possible.
11 points from 7 games, Hugh. It's good going for Motherwell.
Yep. Good going, and the Motherwell, one of these teams you had a little fear about getting involved in the wrong end of the table. They were down there and had to change things around quickly. I thought that Graham Alexander was a very good and astute appointment, and a young manager, but an experienced manager, a manager who's known for working in organisation and just getting a general lift from a new voice in the dressing room. And I think there's more than enough there to keep going. On the Tony Watts thing, I'm delighted, Peter, to see that we're so quick to write off players, and we don't know what's going on in their lives, and we don't know that they're young men. They're young men, and things can happen, and confidence can come and go, and all that movement. Because I remember when he was coming through at Celtic, Peter, I was really, really impressed with him. I thought he was very, very strong. He could hold the ball up, and he was a good finisher. So I'm delighted that he's doing well at Motherwell, and I hope that's just the start of him really, really capitalising on his talent.
Yeah, just before we look at the Premiership table, of course, Crawley lost the game last night, still in that battle, your old club. Stephen, here's what Tommy Wright had to say on their performance.
Yeah, most certainly I'm encouraged. I've been encouraged since I've come in with the quality that's in the squad, and we'll work with them. We know the areas that we've got to improve on, and we've just got to persevere and work hard at that.
And when you look at the Premiership table, we know what's going on at the top end of it, Stephen, but at the bottom end, Killy, still a bit of work to do there. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, 3 clubs probably with the alarm bells ringing: Killy, Ross County and Hamilton.
Yeah, I think Dundee United's result at the weekend, Motherwell are kind of kicking on. I think they're the same as for Kilmarnock. I think I had said in the last 2 games they'd looked lost, but the managers came in and there's a massive improvement. 1 in organisation, 2 in they're having an understanding of what they've to do when they're in possession. That the only tricky part is the manager's not been able to he's only going to be able to bring players in on frees. He's not going to be able to do much dealings, which if he can get a couple of players in that will get them to the end of the season at least and keep them safe. But this time of the season it's tricky. And I think the most comfortable of the 3 teams is Hamilton, because they've done it time and time again.
Yep, absolutely. We've got a couple of things I want to get your thoughts on as well. One of them, obviously, we like to try and mention as many things as possible. David Whitelaw, this really isn't the show for you. You need to go to your club channel or maybe one of the troll sites. Anyone notice how Peter didn't go around the panel asking if it was a red for McGregor? Well, I mean, honestly.
Well,
I don't know how much more I have to say to satisfy people who you can't hear or think. Hugh, McGregor, we've given our point of view. It was definitely a booking. Could have been a red.
Yep, it's one of those yellows that has a tinge of red about it, but it's definitely a yellow. And I think we talked quite forcibly and quite comprehensively about the refereeing performance last night. So
Hugh, what about? Well, again, I just thought, it just gives me, every now and then I get great joy out of leathering people who can't hear. What about that rumour that's going about Steve Clarke for the Celtic job, Hugh? That's gathered a bit of pace. The bookies have started to look at him as a clear favourite. That would be a real twist.
It would be a twist, but I mean, it would be... I think, Peter, I think it would be a perfect appointment for Celtic. I mean, you would be getting a coach that's... I mean, this guy is This guy's a real yin in the vernacular. This is a guy who's, he's worked Mourinho and Bobby Robson, Ruud Gullit, Kenny Dalglish, etc., etc. I mean, he's got and then what he did at Kilmarnock. I think if you and I haven't spoken to, I've got no inside information in this. I think it would be down to what Steve himself wants. Does he want to go into an environment that'll be, really, sort of testing beyond the national job? I mean, you're going into, this is a big job at Celtic this summer. If he's up for it and he thinks, yeah, this is something I would, I'd want, and I'd want to be in the ground floor of revitalising Celtic. Yeah, I would think it'd be a great appointment. That's the only thing I can think of is that, does he want it? Does he need it? Who knows?
Hugh, just briefly,
only after the Euros.
Well, this is the point, Stephen. I was going to say to you when I heard it a couple of weeks back, and I thought, this is a guy who will want to take Scotland to the Euros. He's got there. He's got to enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely.
Does he wait till after the Euros? But the quick point I was going to get to you, and Stephen, I'll get your thoughts on it, and Roughie as well. Hugh, is there any way with a strong finish at the end of the season that Neil Lennon somehow goes on as manager?
I don't think so. No, I think it's over.
Okay, it's worth a thought on that one. Roughie, the next part I'm going to get your thoughts on here is basically Jim McInally was making a comment that it's time to just call a halt with regards to the season. The lower leagues should be scrapped. He was quite forcible about it. It's a waste of money for part-time clubs with the testing for players who work in jobs as well. What's your take on Jim's comments?
Yeah, he's already been told to shut up.
That's not what I asked you. He may well have been.
I'm just telling you, he's already told. Not by me, but the owner of it. He's owner of his club.
He may well have been told to shut up. That wasn't the question. What do you think of the comments?
I think he's wrong. I think we should be going to continue to play. We've got professional footballers who want to play. So we should be doing everything that should be going out there should be to finish the season. And obviously if things come out, that we can't finish the season with 27, we should look at other options to finish the season and continue to keep looking at options to play out the season. I think according to the everything that we've been doing, the first and second divisions want to play. And I think that's a good thing. It's a positive thing.
Yeah, he feels as if the lower leagues have been discriminated against, Stephen.
I think the situation is the thing that makes it more tricky is that a lot of it's part-time. Players are in so many different environments but could there not be a case to put more testing in place, even more than once a week, to minimise the risk? Or I'm with Roughie. I think you've got to do it. They've
already said twice, Stevie, that all the clubs have agreed to be tested twice. They've all agreed to pay for it.
Want it to finish. Yeah, so I can't understand why they're not getting the opportunity to. And they should be able to.
Now, here's the next point, and just the last point on this, because obviously Roughie's given us an insight into the overview, which is they wanted to start, which is right. I want, I'm not leathering you, Roughie. I want your opinion. I don't want you to tell me I'm told to shut up. I value your opinion on this. But the other aspect was listen to Naismith. But the point here is, I've got to, Stevie. Sometimes I've got to strangle him to get the opinion rather than him dodging it. But the point here, Hugh, is that Roughie alluded to it in the last couple of days, and maybe Jim McInally has touched on it as well, is that maybe they're just going through this whole process because they're not going to let it start. They've already gone through this charade, and then eventually they'll say, look, it's not going to start.
It's getting so problematical in terms of fixtures, Peter, already, that we're actually, we're in the red at the moment. It's got to start pretty soon. Clubs can see, it's illogical. I mean, one of the things that's hardly been mentioned, Peter, is, the women's Premiership. It's supposed to be about elite football. And I think, like people at Glasgow City could say, well, we've won the title 13 times. We compete in the Champions League every year. We're elite. Why can't we play? So there's absurdities to it and illogicalities to it. But I think it's getting to the stage. I agree with you. I think as a journalist, it's drifting towards a stage where the easier decision would just be to pull up the goalposts. On a side issue, and just briefly, I just think how football has managed to get through this 11 months and the way it has been nothing short of remarkable. You know, it's getting, things are getting thrown up every day. You've got Bayern Munich player Muller today testing positive in Qatar, while his compatriot Jurgen Klopp can't travel back to Germany to go to his mother's funeral, but Muller can go to Qatar and catch COVID. It's such a difficult and almost illogical thing. But how football has survived this pandemic in terms of games, I think is just extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be remiss of me not to ask you, I mean, the Jambos, you just keep signing players. I mean, Stuart Finlay, the latest on a pre-contract. I like Stuart Finlay. He'd be a good addition for you, Stevie.
Yeah, I think it's an area that we're probably, the manager will say, we're at our thinnest. But I think it goes back to the way that the club's now structured. This should be an ongoing process. Every window that comes up, every year that passes, it's not about, oh, we've just got an opportunity here, we're going to sign. There's a bit more in the background to it now, where identifying players, monitoring them, are they the right fit for the club? And then when the time comes, if you think that's a player to go for, then you make the offer and hopefully it comes in. But it's good signs.
Yep.
I just heard Hugh taking a huge breath there, as if he was going to offer us one golden nugget before we go.
I just think it's just Hearts preparing for the Premiership. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got Queen of the South. Do you think that game will get the go-ahead, Stephen? I look outside our studios and I think to myself,
I think so. Down the West Coast, it's not been as bad as the East Coast, so I don't think that's in doubt at the moment at all.
Yeah, okay. Lots of things that we were talking about there, lots of great points. Thanks to the countless decent people who made their points on Facebook and YouTube as well about a number of issues, some of them very, very sensitive indeed. And of course, at the tail end there, you can always tell it gets super sensitive. Roughie gets a little bit agitated. And obviously, eventually, he gets angry and then makes his point. Roughie, here's a wee thing for you before we go. I watched one of those all-time great FA Cup ties last night. It was fantastic to see the highlights of Everton and Tottenham. And still, Gareth Bale is not getting a kick of the ball, and Tottenham are out of the cup. And now Jose is saying, Bale is saying he was uncomfortable play. He didn't want to play.
Yeah, I don't get that. It's a sort of a superstar mode. You can come away with some of these things. But as I was watching the game, I fell into one of your modes when Spurs went 1-0 up. I went, that's it, shut shop, 1-0, end of the game. And then lo and behold, it's 5-4. So I'm going to jump in the next time.
Yeah. Did you watch it, Stephen? I mean, obviously, have you ever been involved with Everton in such an outrageous cup tie like
that? No, not as many goals than that. I was in a 5-4 when I was at Norwich. We played Liverpool in the league, and it was a 5-4 game. But it was some cup tie. It was some watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyable anyway. Do you still have a soft spot for your old clubs? The Evertons
definitely.
and the Norwich? Yeah?
Definitely. I think, especially where Everton have been, how they've invested and with a new manager, I think there is a real push on, and the fans especially, they just want silverware. And that's hopefully come this season.
Is that one of the best? I mean, listen, you've enjoyed every club you've been at, but is that one of the best times? When Roughie and I went down to see you, we thought you looked really content and happy down there.
Yeah, and I was anxious before I went, just because first time moving away and things like that, going to a new club, not knowing many people, but it's a fantastic club, run perfectly, and there was a real togetherness, and still get loads of friends at the club, so desperate for them to do well.
Yeah, and Roughie, you said to me, look at Stephen just waving to us there from his purple Ferrari. He looks really happy as he's leaving the training ground.
I can't remember. That was the first thing we talked about. Is what cars everybody was driving. When they all
You
came
didn't
out
see the white
dressing
van
room.
getting reversing in.
Yeah,
Charlie's white van was down there.
By the way, I have to tell you, we did mention to Charlie that you've been saying he's got a white van to deliver his wages, and he absolutely caned you. He says it's you that's got a white van at Tynecastle. Although I have to say, the one abiding memory, and I think a lot of people will enjoy this. Not that you had a flash car at Everton, but I couldn't stop laughing when you pointed out Samuel Eto'o's car to us in the car park when he was playing at Everton. I mean, who drives about in a yellow? Is it a yellow Lamborghini or Ferrari in Liverpool?
No, it was a Bugatti. It was like, so
Was
it's
it a-
more expensive. It's £2 million worth.
Oh.
But to be fair to him, he wasn't eager in bringing it in at the start. There was a few boys in the changing room that were right into cars, and they kind of egged him on. Come on, get it in. Next week, this Bugatti's in, and I don't know too much about cars, but £2 million and unbelievable machine.
Yeah,
what was the car wee McGeady had that was revving up in the car park?
An old Mustang, like a 68 Mustang or something.
Oh, it was
Some
a
machine
cracker.
as well.
It was an absolute, if I give you an insight into it, Hugh, it's £100 just to accelerate from 0 to 60. It's as simple as that. That kind of sums it up. Anyway, thank you to Steven Naismith, to Hugh McDonald and Alan Rough, and also to many of you who handled the topic at the top of the programme with great sensitivity and understanding. It is a difficult time. It's a difficult review, and hopefully lessons will be learned, and hopefully some of the people who suffered the abuse, the children, will have closure to an extent. It will never take away the pain, but we have to adopt an ethos of learning from mistakes and trying to put a structure in place so that it never happens again, so that kids, young boys and girls can go and play football without fear of any ill being brought upon them. It's the best way I can sum it up. So let's hope Scottish football learns the lessons of the review, takes them forward, and we can all enjoy our football. So thank you to each and every one of you who understand the sensitivity of the subject. From Stephen, Hugh, Roughie and myself, thanks for watching.
Expect the best used car deals guaranteed. Visit Arnold